Alan, so maybe quick intro so that you know a little bit more that what we do. Maybe you, Alan, first, and I do, and then we dig into the interesting topic.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name is Alan Evans. I'm the CEO of Freeverse. Freeverse is a company, a blockchain infrastructure company focused on creating dynamic NFTs and new experiences and helping companies create new experiences in Web3, whether it's in loyalty or gaming or beyond.
Thanks, Alan. I'm Christian. I'm partner with Earlybird. We are one of the largest European venture capital funds investing in early stage, as the name indicates. We do quite a lot in fintech, insurance tech, including Web3 and software infrastructure. Basically, we invest, and deep tech. So those are the three main areas, investing from very early stage to late stage across Europe. And we are also, to be honest, and here also investor in Freeverse. All right. Let's start. Well, we just got a little bit intro about the new Apple goggle. What happens in Web3? I think it was hyped a year ago. I think you had a lot of chats about Web3 and what things how to develop, but it has gone quiet. What happened? What's your take on the current state?
Yeah, it's very interesting how a lot of these technological focus areas shift over time. And it's true that last year, maybe 2 years ago, Web3 was the next big thing. Blockchain and so on and so forth. Now we've shifted in the recent months to AI, justifiably, right? We've seen the advances of ChatGPT and so on that have really wowed many of us. And now it seems with Apple's new goggles coming out, that focus will shift towards AR and VR. I think many of these technologies are linked. I don't think any of them is going away. If you look back at, take the VR example, for example, I remember, the first VR goggles coming out. I remember the Oculus Kickstarter when it came out, right? And of course that went the way, and it's gone the way of Meta and so on. I think there's always these shifts.
But nothing is taken off of this. Everything basically had started with a little hype and then has come down. So it's always we see these kind of nothing has really taken off. What do you think? What is missing in Web3 basically, or what can make it still scale somehow?
Yeah, I think that this talk about identity is actually a really key issue for Web3 generally, right? And so, how can we link this idea of digital and physical identity, what we're talking about? And I think as our online personas, as more of us begin to understand what an online persona really means and what it involves, whether it's in the metaverse, which I don't like the term, I think it's going out of fashion now, or whether it's in gaming, or whether it's just in linking that Web 2 world, this idea of ownership and how do I present who I am via what I own, I think that is almost the missing link in Web3. And I think if you look at the classic Gartner curve of technology adoption, we've certainly reached that peak now and we're going down with Web3, but I do think we'll come up the other side to that sort of more stable plateau where people begin to realize that actually identifying your way online in a decentralized way makes sense not just for you as an individual, but I think it also makes sense for the companies that are building those platforms as well.
And what on this path, and I agree with you, on this path, what is important here? Is it this bridge in the end, building this bridge, or is it really two separate worlds? What do you think? What will really foster those things?
I think so far we've seen two separate worlds, right? At the moment we have two separate worlds. We have our physical world, and then we have our online, if you like, our digital world. Some of us may have played video games like World of Warcraft, or perhaps we've gone into Fortnite, or we've played around in Second Life back in the day when that was a thing. But those lives have been very much separate lives, and the way we present ourselves within those virtual environments may or may not be similar to how we present ourselves in the real world. Like, for example, Christian and I are both dressed very casually here, and so by what we own, right, it's presenting our image to you guys, right? If we were both dressed in pin-sharp Versace suits, your impression would be slightly different based on what we own, right? And in the virtual world, that's been separate so far, right? So yes, you can buy virtual goods to decorate your car or your avatar or whatever it is, but that's separate. And I think what we're beginning to see now is efforts to link your real world persona to your virtual persona by what you own in the real world being mirrored, if you like, in the virtual world as well. And so you can have a link between those two so far distinct items and worlds.
Okay. But if you link it, you can't express yourself differently in the virtual world than you are in the real world. Like you wearing a suit and then maybe in the virtual world. How do you see? Do you think this will converge then in the way so that you basically have your one-to-one representation and this is be the bridge then between the two?
It's an interesting point because many of us would say that I like the fact that I don't have to be myself in a virtual world, right? I like being slightly different. I'm reminded now, seeing the DeLorean car that we have out here, one of the original ones, right? And it looks great and, gives us memories of Back to the Future and all that kind of things. And what I find interesting is that the DeLorean brand is now relaunching, and part of their relaunched brand was, well, okay, you can get to buy an NFT of a DeLorean car, and then when you buy the real car, you get that sort of digital version of the car as well, which I think, okay, fine, it's nice to have that link. But it has all sorts of problems with that, right? Because, for example, okay, I get a digital verification, the fact that I bought this DeLorean, this brand new DeLorean, but what if I sell the DeLorean in the real world? Do I get to keep the digital token? Am I forced to give it away? Well, the whole point of decentralization is you can't force anyone to do anything, right? But what if I sell the digital token to somebody else? Am I obliged then to sell the real car as well? And so I think a lot of these questions about how we can actually force the linking, if we should force the linking of the digital and physical identities, I think that's very difficult, and I don't think those questions have been solved yet.
Yeah. Well, the other hand, there's also a use case, basically, owning a car and having a digital representation. I mean, this is good for basically, displaying ownership and so on, authenticity and so on. So there are also use cases for exactly that. But this is obviously nothing new, which is already there. It's a given, and probably this will come. But in your example, how do you think this will play out in terms of what's the use case of the guys from DeLorean here, in terms of how do you make it?
Yeah, to be completely honest with you, I don't think they have much of a use case. I think it was more of a jump on the Web3 boom and try and make some noise. I do think that other automotive manufacturers are using Web3 in innovative ways, right? So, for example, our partners, Cupra, the Spanish car manufacturer here, they've created a whole, they call it metaverse, online world, virtual worlds, which they're using both as a way of promoting their brand to the next generation, right? Gen Z or Gen Z for the Americans in the room, right? And also a way of linking, your ownership of a real car. Obviously, they want to sell more cars. That's their objective in doing this. But also linking it to loyalty and presence and marketing and multiple touch points for different things. So their metaverse not only has Cupra, but it has other brands like Primavera Sound. It has some drinks manufacturers in there as well. The whole point is to try and bring people together in an online community where your activities in that community, right, can actually lead to benefits and rewards, whether they're discounts, whether they're access codes, whether they're events in the real world. And I think that idea of linking, that's where I see the use cases of linking your online virtual activity to allowing you to do things that you may not be able to do, whether it's buying stuff or whether it's attending events or whatever it is, in the real world.
Okay. I mean, maybe interesting to elaborate also what you guys are doing. Have we created living NFTs? Maybe that's something to explore and basically display some use cases out of this. So why are they living?
Yeah.
A bit contradictory, but maybe you can explain what.
Yeah. So I think we talked about ownership, right, and how ownership in the digital world is a way of presenting who you are. And when you mention ownership in the digital world, a lot of people think of NFTs, right, non-fungible tokens, which kind of justifiably have a bit of a bad name at the moment. I think a lot of the initial use case for NFTs was very much investment, right? We saw the rise of the play-to-earn gaming movement, which is a bit of a Ponzi scheme. You may have heard headlines of pieces of art being sold for $69 million or whatever it is. I think those use cases are niche, right? People do collect things, right? People collect things in the real world. And, people do collect stamps and trading cards and art and things like that. But I think the idea of digital collectibles is a very niche use case in the wider digital world. So what we do at Freeverse is very much, I believe very strongly in the concept of ownership, of ownership of digital items and being able to trade digital items for real money. But I think that ownership, the value of what you own, should be based on more than just how rare it is, right? So if you have a living or a dynamic NFT, a dynamic asset that can change and evolve based on how you've used it, then the value of that to other people is very much based on its utility to them, right? So for example, let's take a virtual world or a game. Let's take a car, right? A virtual car, right? So you own a virtual car, and what's the value of that car to somebody else? Well, if you buy it and it's just don't change it, then the value is the same, right? It doesn't change. In fact, it might even go down because it's second-hand, right? But I, as a proud Welshman from Wales in the UK, if I take advantage of the fact that I can paint that car and paint it with a Welsh dragon, right, then somebody, another Welshman, may pay more for that car because I've changed it, right? Or upgrade the engine of the car so it drives faster in the game, all right? So the idea of being able to upgrade that digital asset in the same way that I might paint a real car with the Welsh Dragon or upgrade the engine of a real car, right, in the real world. So the value of that digital item is based on what I have done with it rather than how rare it is. And so gaming is a very strong use case. What we're seeing also is that brands are hopping on to the idea of Web3 and dynamic ownership as a way of encouraging loyalty. So, for example, Cooper is one of our clients doing this. Another good example in the Web3 world is Starbucks. They're moving, in the States, they've transitioned, or they've merged their loyalty program where you buy coffees, but now when you buy coffees, you also upgrade one of your tokens, which enables you to have discounts on more coffees or merchandising or whatever it is. So I think a lot of brands are using this idea of upgrading your digital ownership based on what you do in the real world. And that is essentially, this idea of linking your digital and physical identity.
Mm-hmm. Maybe going back a little bit to the beginning in terms of the Apple Vision goggles. And Apple is typically not basically the front runner in technology, as we all know, but once they have jumped on this bandwagon, which others have been created, it has become very successful. And this is shown with everything they did, with the iPhone, obviously, with the iPod back then, with the Apple Watch, everything. So now the question is, what do you think is behind? Does this maybe accelerate something or basically start scaling some models here with a new product they have launched?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I've only read what everyone else has read, but I must admit I'm lucky enough to have a very good friend of mine who is a senior virtual reality engineer at Meta, right? And so I asked him the other day on WhatsApp, given this Meta, right? So what's your impression? What's the Meta impression of the new Apple goggles? And his opinion was that they're incredibly technologically brilliant, right? They're the best VR goggles that have been launched by a very large margin, a very large distance. They didn't expect the things that the eye representation, so it tracks your eye so people can see where you're looking in the room. They didn't expect that. However, he said, what he didn't see was a strong use case, right? All they showed so far is the idea of seeing flat screens in front of your virtual world, right? So you have an infinite desktop, if you like, right? And he is worried that if Apple can't find the killer use case for virtual reality and augmented reality, who can? Right? And so we'll see. Maybe they've got some more tricks up their sleeve. As you mentioned, they're typically not the leaders. They typically bring stuff out in dribs and drabs. And so maybe we'll see some killer use case coming out. But I'm personally, technologically, it's wonderful, but I can't see us all wearing VR goggles anytime in the very near future, at least.
But do you see anything in gaming or something like this where you see this make happen? This combination of the real world because this is also part of the bridge we're talking about here in terms of this. This can be a bridge basically because you're still in the real world basically combined with a virtual world and can blend in and over. Can you imagine something there?
I think gaming is the natural home, or has been the natural home so far for AR and VR. And I do think that there are certain, I hesitate to call them niche applications, but even so far, they have been niche applications. I think certainly if you're selling a pair of goggles for $3,500, you're not going to get mainstream adoption overnight. But I do think there are applications in gaming. I think there are more applications in gaming for this idea of digital identity, right? Beyond, and we may or may not be wearing VR and AR goggles. Perhaps we will. I'm not saying we won't, right? Particularly if they make them lighter and easier to use. But I do see this idea of your digital identity being crucial in games. And so one example is, a pipe dream that many people have in the gaming world is, can I buy something in one game and take it over to another game, right? Sure, you can. The technology exists, right? It's absolutely there. The question is whether we'll get to the stage where there is a common understanding of how that works. For example, there are difficulties not only in sort of, technical difficulties in how do you render an Angry Birds hat in a top of the range driving game, for example, right? Does it make sense? But there are also even sort of game balancing levels. Let's imagine 2 car driving games. Let's imagine that the top car in one game is a Ferrari, right? And you play for hours and you get your top car, right? And you say, great, now I'm going to take that same car to a different game. But let's imagine that different game is a Formula One game where a Ferrari is the lowest possible car you can get, right? So how does the beginner level item in one game match up with the advanced level item in another game? And so this pipe dream of being able to take your digital belongings from one area, one game to another, even if you put aside IP licensing issues and agreements between game manufacturers and art pipelines and development pipelines and so on and so forth, I think there are still quite some considerable challenges there. But I like the idea. I think it's a good idea, right? I love the idea of being able to take my stuff from one game to another, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Maybe, are there any questions before we basically close here with the final remarks? Are there any questions here? Burning questions to Alan, myself? No questions. So everybody wants to buy a Vision goggle and then go ahead. No, but maybe back to NFTs. How do you see in general basically the development here? I mean, obviously you're totally into this in terms of where you're with your approach, technology approach, your platform you're building. How do you see this? Obviously, in general, they are down. Everybody's a little bit scared. Or in which direction will it go? Will it go up? Or where are we in the market here? How do you see this in general?
I think the term NFT will, if not die, then forever be associated with this concept of the digital collectible, right? And this way, this piece of art that was worth $69 million, or, you may have heard of Axie Infinity, this sort of play-to-earn game which, went up like a rocket and then fell down equally as quickly. And I think the term non-fungible token will forever be associated, perhaps unfairly, with this, I hate to say it, but kind of a Ponzi scheme model of people buying things with the hope that someone else will pay more money for something that's rare in the future. But I think the concept of digital ownership will go beyond that, and the ability to actually own something in the new virtual world, whether we're wearing AR or VR goggles, and having that linked or not to the real world, I think there will be a future in that, and I don't think that's going away anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, we also think that basically the technology is so strong that it basically will find applications elsewhere, and I agree with you. Probably will be associated with the art, basically the collectible things we see in the market. Yeah, very good. I think pretty much on time. If there are no questions, final remark from your side.
Final remark, yeah, the future is all digital.
No, I think it's a good time actually also to start your business. So if you ever think about starting a business, now is the time basically. If you look back, whenever great things have been developed, they have been developed in exactly those times basically, either down cycles or where it's kind of flat and nobody knows how the future will look. So I can only encourage you basically to start your business. And there's funding out there also, so this can tell you.